Hello and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week through news and headlines ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and your co-host this week is Matt. Say hi to everyone, Matt.
Hello.
This week it is a bonus episode as we do have a guest. We're going to talk some new comics that have released, some that are coming out, and we have from Frank Miller Presents, of course, long-time DC Brokettes know him, Dan Didio. Welcome on, Dan.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is great. It's very weird to be introduced as from Frank Miller Presents, but I have to get used to it, I imagine.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. And we are going to talk about some of these books that are releasing from Frank Miller Presents. This is an all-new line. So the two that, by the time this episode releases, the two that are available right now at your local comic shop, at your favorite online comic retailer. And the first one is Ancient Enemies, written by Dan Didio and art by Danilo Beyruth. Can you tell us a bit about Ancient Enemies, Dan?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a book that I've been thinking about for a while. I mean, the great thing about, I shouldn't even put it this way, but you know, during the off time, during COVID, you got a chance to really get a chance to think and really formulate ideas. And this is a book that I've been thinking for a while about. It actually has its roots, believe it or not, in an idea that I had back at DC as a part of an idea behind an Ultimate DC line. And then I took a lot of the concepts and thoughts that I had and helped to recreate it and really just build my own little world around it, which has been a lot of fun. Then I sat down with Frank, and when we were formulating the company, I had pitched him this idea. He liked it. He had gave me a couple of thoughts about how to push this even further ahead. And you know, it sort of came together in a really fun and exciting way. And what I like to do is I always like to look at the world around us and see what's happening and try to formulate events and stories that really capture the feelings of the world with creating a brand new environment itself and a whole new sensibility. And what I was able to do is create some new characters and new stories around a high concept, which is basically about two alien worlds that have basically been at war for millennium. And ultimately, they all their resources exhausted, but they refuse to quit fighting. There's just such an institutionalized hatred in these two worlds. They would never give in to each other. So what they decide to do is pick one champion from each side, and through these two champions, whoever wins ultimately decides the fate of a galaxy. But in the process, both sides cheat. The ships they were coming to neutral territory crash on Earth, taking out most of the eastern seaboard and basically restructuring our world around it. And as it does, these two ancient enemies start to fight again on our world, and these different heroes and characters that arise from our world start choosing sides and ultimately start getting involved in this battle that they actually have no understanding or knowledge apart, but they wind up being part of this event as it moves forward. And it gives you a chance to really examine a lot of fun characters, a lot of great relationships, and I'm having a blast. When I first set the book up, I set it up really in the sensibilities that I believe Darwin Cook brought to New Frontier. I loved the lyrical storytelling that told over a long period of time how these characters grew and evolved and developed. And what I did is create an event and populated with a bunch of new characters I think that people might have some fun with.
New Frontiers got me sold already as that being a touchstone for it.
Yeah, I mean, the New Frontier for me was it was really just a fascinating project. I mean, I'll digress for a second if you don't mind. Believe it or not, New Frontier was actually sitting in a drawer when I got to DC, and I found it in Mark Chiarello's editorial drawer, and they were planning not to publish it, and they had these beautiful pages done by Darwin Cook. And one of the reasons why they weren't going to do it was because it didn't fit into current DC continuity, so they didn't want to make it work. But the story worked so well together, and how the characters told the stories was true to the characters and was able to really encapsulate the feelings of the DC universe. So here I am creating my own little universe, and I'm trying to find those characters to populate that world to really be able to tell this big, long story, but still give it a really important personal touch. And the characters I'm creating, I created like 4 basic characters that are there. There's the 2. Even though they're ultimately dead from the crash that came on when they landed on Earth, they were able to pass on their mission onto surrogates. And the surrogates rise in 2 different places. There's one character called the Genie. The other side is a character called the First Responder. And ultimately, these 2 men take on these powers and take on the hatred of these two worlds without even understanding why they're fighting. But it's been institutionalized and ingrained in them that they have to complete the mission and fight it out. And then in the middle of it all, there's some other characters. There was one hero on the world called the Red, and ultimately she had given up her mantle. Her son has taken it on, and she's actually trying to work with his son. So I have a mother-son, a superhero team that's played out for fun, but also played out in an interesting manner, given their own relationship, and we get to see how they develop. And then I have another group called the Greater Good, and I always love the expression "the Greater Good" because it implies that you're doing something more important than yourself, and that you're giving to a higher cause. But when you talk to people, everybody has a different sense of what the greater good is. And everybody works to their own version of the greater good. So I have a team, and you're not really sure if they're on the right side or the wrong side of the fight, but ultimately they're true to what their mission is. And that's something that gets revealed as the story goes forward.
And I know this one sounds like it is very much your baby, a very personal project, Ancient Enemies. Although it is titled Frank Miller Presents, did Frank Miller have any hand in some of the characters in here or in the way that the story was told?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the fun part about it. The origin of Frank Miller Presents is an interesting story because both, Frank and I had stayed in touch after my departure from DC, and we really, kept in contact, and we're trying to find ways and things that we could do together. And as the story goes, Frank asked me to edit a book for him that he wanted to do at DC, and I found it very funny. And I said, I don't think they'd be happy with that. I don't think I'd be happy with that. So ultimately, what we did is he said, listen, I said, why don't we do Ronin? You always had a sequel to Ronin, and let's build a company around Ronin, and we could do it ourselves rather than working through surrogates. And I thought that was a lot of fun. He thought it was a lot of fun because it was something he never did before. And when we named the company Frank Miller Presents, one of the things that we thought was, it's collaboration. It's about everybody working together. And for Frank, it's about passing on a craft that he has learned over the years that he wants to work and share with others. For me, I love the collaboration of building things with others. So when I did Ancient Enemies, I said, and he said he knew it was my book, but I said, but I need you involved in some way. Not just reading it over and giving notes, but really, let's create something here. So we had a running joke at DC, Frank and I, and every time that I came to him for new projects, he would say he wanted to do Brother Power the Geek. And that was his joke. And I said, I'm not going to waste Frank Miller on Brother Power the Geek. So lo and behold, when I asked him to create a character for Ancient Enemies, he created a character called the Geek. And we're introducing him into the book in the second issue, which I think is a lot of fun. And also Frank's telling the origin. He's actually going to do the backup in the second issue of Ancient Enemies too, which also gets me very excited. But what's most interesting about it is that when he created the Geek, it's this misformed hunchback character, and ultimately it's something that I never would have created. It's not a character that I think like, you know what I mean? And he brought a new dynamic to the book by introducing this character, which I thought was wonderful because as soon as I saw the character, I saw the story potential with the other characters I created. So by him introducing this new character into my book, it allowed the book to take on new dimensions that I didn't even think the series had. And it really helped expand the story. And ultimately, that gets to the heart of everything that Frank Miller Presents is, which is basically a collaboration between talent, artists, writers, everybody coming together and bringing their idea in and finding a way to enhance and grow the material rather than just sticking with a single vision. I always believe that, storytelling should be fluid and you should follow the direction the characters take you. And by him introducing new characters, allowed me to take this series into a brand new area that I think helps it make even a better book.
Ancient Enemies is a 6-issue miniseries along with the next one that is also out currently, which is Ronin Book 2. And you had mentioned how Frank Miller is kind of spearheading a lot of these ideas, and there's a collaboration going on with some of these writers and artists. And for Ronin Book 2, this is something that he truly had to, in a way, hand off, even though he is writing it. And with the art by Philip Tan and Daniel Henricks, is this more Frank kind of showing some of these other artists his process, and are they sort of learning and having to relearn their process as they work on his book?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I saw this happen with Andy Kubert and Frank on Dark Knight 3. Frank was giving layouts to Andy, and he was giving direction to Andy, and Andy, incredibly seasoned, professional, one of the top artists in the business. And he found his own sense of art evolving by working with Frank. Same exact things happening with Philip. Frank's doing it starts with Frank just doing loose thumbnails for Philip. And instead of Frank writing a script, he actually does thumbnails with story notes all around the page that explains what the story is about, with even little snippets of dialogue. And he sends that to Philip, and then Philip takes that and adapts it into his own art. But as it developed, Philip wanted more detailed material from Frank. So Frank starts doing layouts that aren't just thumbnails, but actually, by the time we get to the start of the second issue, we could probably publish his layouts. He's doing pencils and inks. Because what's happening is Frank's doing layouts for Philip, Philip's drawing the layouts, and Frank's reacting to the strength of Philip's art and the strength of Daniel's inks and tones. And he's upping his game on the upper side. So he's starting to elevate his own material because he wants to keep up to these guys. And they're almost playing off each other in a wonderful way that's giving us some great product. And so much so that even when Frank did the first variant cover for Ronin, which is this beautiful wraparound, he looked at Philip's artwork and he says, he actually called up Daniel Enriquez, the inker, and said, "Can you do your inks and tones over my work so that I can bring my art style in line with what you guys are doing here in the book?" And Daniel was over the moon. Frank was over the moon with the final project. But it shows you that everybody's wanting to just do something better. It's not about making sure that I have my stamp, my sense, my brand on it. It's more about, I want to make sure I got the best book, best art, best product on the page.
A small digression for me, but this is probably the book in the line that I'm most looking forward to. Back in 1989, when the Batman movie was being made and promoted, and I first saw about the Dark Knight Returns, and I was looking for like a copy of Dark Knight Returns in the local library, and I couldn't find it, but I found something that looked a lot like it, and that was Ronin, and that was the first Frank Miller book that I've ever read. So I'm really excited to see a sequel to it.
Oh yeah, no, the interesting thing is that Frank had a story for this he told me he had a story from when the first series ended, and he always wanted to do a follow-up. But honestly, DC never gave him that opportunity, primarily because he had the success with Dark Knight, and ultimately he started to move into his own material past that. And he couldn't do Ronin outside of that. But as part of this, once we started everything, we were able to work it out. Frank was able to work out with DC, and they were very obliging about him getting his rights back on certain aspects of the book, which allowed us to publish our own series outside of the company.
So with both Ancient Enemies and Ronin Book 2 being 6-issue miniseries, Ancient Enemies kind of seems to be more of a superhero type of universe book. Once these 6 wrap up, if readers want to see more of it, are we then going to go to Ancient Enemies Volume 2, Number 1, or are you looking to just kind of take it as a step at a time, do 6 issues, and then visit them later on if you choose to do more?
Well, actually, I'm already doing more.
Awesome.
Doing more. I'm working with Kevin Van Hook, and Kevin and I are doing one-shots in between, because Ancient Enemies is a bi-monthly book. It's an oversized book. The first issue is 64 pages. Every subsequent issue is 48 pages post after that. And it's like I said, it's one big story. And ultimately, I wanted to do breakouts and give more backstory and more focus on the individual characters that populate the series. So I'm working with Kevin Van Hook, and what we're doing is we're doing 4 one-shots in between the issues of Ancient Enemies. So between 2 and 3, you'll get a Genie one-shot. It's a 24-page, the regular 32-page comic, regular size. And then we'll do one for the Wraith and Son, and then also the Greater Good and the First Responder. So each one of them get their own little one-shot in between the regular series, so it keeps the series flowing, and it all ties up very nicely. I have a big story arc laid out, so I know exactly the beats we want to hit, and the important beats of the story that I think help really expand on people's understanding and hopefully love for the characters.
So with these titles, Frank Miller presents, there are going to be no digital releases to these comic books. These are going to be paper and ink. How does that affect the artists as far as the colors, the inking they choose, and the paper, since they know that they don't have to write or lay out or draw to cater to an iPad or a tablet? Instead, they know it's going to go straight to a comic, right?
Yeah, listen, we actually, what happened was that the way we built these books, they're very difficult to read on an iPad. Every page is a double page spread within Ronin. It's a double page spread, so they might have panel breaks on a double page, but it's laid out 2 pages landscape. It's huge. and it really lets the art just explode off the page. I think by putting it digital would do a disservice to the art.
Hmm.
And we wanted to make sure the art was first. And we're clear about that. The other thing we're doing that's really interesting is with Ancient Enemies, and Ronan's black and white, Ancient Enemies is in color. With Ancient Enemies, we've desaturated the colors. We pulled the colors back. One of the things that Frank and I would discuss all the time is just about coloring in books today, about how they're overcolored, how because we're able through a computer be able to put as many colors on the page as possible, people are oversaturating the pages. And when you're looking at the color on a computer screen, the color is backlit, so it's very shiny because the light's coming from behind it. When you're looking at a piece of paper, the light's on top of the page, and ultimately, if the page isn't colored properly, it can turn muddy. And so we're being very aware of the format and style that we're doing it on, because quite honestly, one size doesn't fit all. Just because you did sequential storytelling doesn't mean that it works in every medium. You really should play to the medium you are working in so it shows the best. And we decided that we wanted to make this about print. So therefore, we're working all the storytelling to the print medium so that it works best there. And if we ever had the success we wanted to move in digital or some other area, then you know what? We would want to craft a book that works to the digital reading experience rather than the print reading experience. But that being said, though, we're not issuing the books digitally. But when we come down to the graphic novel and when we do the collection, I'll probably do a digital releases of that. That makes a little more sense because some people like a larger book to have it on an iPad so that it's easier to carry, easier to read. So we'll work along those lines. But for us, it's print first, and that's our primary concern.
Aside from the talent, the Miller and Didio name on here, I will tell you that you putting the physical printing first is what got me most excited about Frank Miller Presents. Throughout the years of working at a comic shop and managing one, I did notice that when you were at DC, you did very much pay attention to the comic shop, the owners, the direct market, and you very much listened, whereas other publishers and other companies weren't quite to the quote unquote street level as you were. I was there during the DC Rebirth tour that you and Jim were doing, and it was great for me as a retailer to see that level of care. And now I'm seeing that from Frank Miller Presents. I'm seeing that the inks and the colors, you're looking at it from a way of, okay, this is going to be on paper first. And I know when I see some comics today from some of the bigger publishers, you're right. I will look at a panel and I'm like, this is really dark and lost, and maybe it'll look better digitally. I don't know. I'm not a digital reader, but that's what I've also noticed as just a regular comic reader myself. Mm-hmm. So to see you taking that page and going straight to print and having that be what the priority is for now, that gets me excited, and I'm sure you've got something to share about that, Matt, as an artist yourself.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that there's a push back for a print. Like I had dipped into reading comics digitally. I moved from apartment to apartment, so lugging around comics was a detriment. I didn't want to move all those, so I did go digital for a little while, but I always came back to the print, and especially like the collected editions, because something I can put on my bookshelf. So I'm happy to see a focus and emphasis put back on the medium from which comics came from.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go one step further. We're also putting an emphasis back on storytelling and character, and not trying to sell covers. That's the other thing that we feel really strongly about. And you know what? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure where the industry is at this moment in time. So the fact that you go out with one variant cover just as purely as an incentive cover, which was created as the first place rather than just as a sales tool, is been interesting to me because when I hear about books doing well and I see they have 10, 20 plus covers on a book, I'm wondering if anybody's actually reading the insides.
Right.
And we're putting a lot of energy and a lot of effort for people to read our books, and I can say straight out, just with Ronin alone, I would put the art on every page against any cover in the business, and it'll blow it away. That's how beautiful this book is. So if somebody's buying a book because of the beauty of art on a cover, then this is a book for them because every page is just a beautiful piece of art.
Kind of springing off that, prior to your departure, DC had a reputation for being the most retailer and back catalog friendly big publisher. Now that you're back in the smaller publisher sandbox, how do you approach and incentivize retailers to take a chance when you don't have that same back catalog or the large number of resources that a larger publisher afforded you.
It's tough out there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, what we did is we did an ashcan back in August just for people to see the type of books we're going to do. Because one of the things I realized is I didn't want to go out in the market with just cold, with people not even knowing what we're about. So at least they got a sample of both Ronin and Ancient Enemies in the ashcan that we gave away back in August. So there was an awareness to this. But we have, look, we have a lot of things working against us. We're bi-monthly. We have a little bit higher of a price tag on it. We're 48-page books, 48 story pages, not a 32-page comic. We only have one cover that's a 1 in 25 incentive. And what I hope is that, is that people find the books, they read it, and they want to come back and read another one, and then another one after that. And my goal is not to start up on the top of the hill, but do this slow climb up, show growth over the months, not show decline, not to over incentivize people so they get a first issue and then see everybody disappear for the second one. As a matter of fact, I stacked my deck a little bit for Ancient Enemies, and I made sure that Frank's doing art in the second issue of Ancient Enemies just to make that one a little more valuable than the first one in a weird way. Because I want to see these things grow, and I want people to give it a chance and pick up the next issue and come along with it. And we'll see if that works. The most fun that we're having, because we're talking about Ancient Enemies and Ronin, our third book's Pandora, which is being done. Frank did the initial concept and ideas. We handed it off to Emma Kubert, and she's done a beautiful job laying it out and building the world and designing the book. Her art and colors are stunning on it. And then I brought two new writers in, Chris Silvestri, and I'm forgetting everybody's name for a second. And
Anthony Marinville?
Yes, thank you. Anthony Marinville. I completely blank on Anthony, so forgive me a second. And both of the guys came in. They're coming in from the world of animation and live action TV. They worked on the Star Trek Discovery series, so they know about world building, and they have a really good young voice. I actually worked with them. They helped me craft my first prose novel that's coming out next year. And I thought these guys would be great working on a DC. Whoops, there you go. I finally did it. Working with Frank Miller Presents. I should keep a quarter jar. But working with Frank Miller Presents. But they brought a nice voice. So, we're showing variety in our product. That's what we wanted to do out of the gate. You have this high-end science fiction adventure series in Ronin that's rooted in manga and anime. Then you've got Ancient Enemies that really is a traditional superhero book. I have no qualms about saying that. It is everything that I love about superhero comics being done in a book. And then you have this beautiful young adult adventure going on with Pandora. And those are our first three series out. So nobody's going to be able to pigeonhole the sensibilities of Frank Miller Presents other than great storytelling and beautiful art,
So you've got three titles here that are hitting different ages, with all ages being young adult being Frank Miller's Pandora. And then you've got something for some of the older readers like Ronin, and then Ancient Enemies, as you were saying, a more traditional superhero title. So you're really hitting all the different audiences here with the different titles.
Yeah, and when you're a new company, you want to try and expect. You can't put out a lot of product because you're new, and you don't have the infrastructure to support it. So you want to try different paths with a different material and see where the audience is and what they're reacting to, and that's great. And then naturally, we have one more, ace in the hole, I like to call it, which is Frank's writing and drawing a Sin City prequel series that's set in the Old West. It's called Blood and Dust. And it tells the origin of Basin City, which is Sin City, and how it came to be. And that's our book coming down the road. So we have a real fun array of product that we're all excited about and enjoying working on. So that's the good thing.
Speaking of expansion, I love the enthusiasm, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing more Sin City work. Where do you see Frank Miller Presents in, say, blue sky 5-10 years?
You know what? If we were here still doing this in 5-10 years, I'll be a real happy man, because it shows that we were right, and there's still a strong market with a hunger for comics out there. That's what we're looking for, and we're trying to prove that that's still there and still viable. And I would never do anything more than, I could say 4 to 8 books per month. Or 4 to 8 items. You've got collections and things like that. We're not looking to compete on any level with any of the other companies out there. We're looking to maintain a level of quality and fun and involvement in every one of our books, and we only have so much bandwidth. So we want to make sure that everything we do is something that we believe in and we're enjoying. And I have a couple of properties that we're planning to bring down the line. Frank has it as well. We both have a commitment to the company that each of us will bring one original product to Frank Miller Presents every year minimum. So that way we know we'll always be out there refreshing the pipeline with new material and new ideas, and for the ones that we launch and they're successful, to make sure we continue on their success as well.
So just as a recap, Ancient Enemies, Ronin Book 2, out now. Frank Miller's Pandora coming out later. That's going to be a 6-issue mini, along with Blood and Dust by Frank Miller, written and art. And then we've got another Sin City title, written by Frank Miller and art by Milo Manera. Incredible. That one is also what we're looking at later on next year, midsummer, I'm guessing.
Pandora's out on December 7th of this year. Then we get into next year. We have, I imagine we're going to be seeing Blood and Dust probably around April or May of next year. I'm looking at August for the Milo Manera. He's getting started on that book in February. So we think he'll be able to turn it around. It's only a 24-page story. And it's actually the first time Frank's let anyone but himself draw anything from Sin City. So this was a big compromise for him. But Frank's a huge Manera fan. Manera put him on the spot at a convention on a panel that he said he wanted to draw Sin City. So Frank said yes. So that's how a book like that gets made.
So I know this is going to kind of be like a career retrospective on my next question. But from your days with Mainframe Entertainment, doing reboots, launching Black Bull Entertainment with Jeremy Shamus, or DC architecting multiple sequels to Crisis, 52, with a weekly comic, the All Star line, New 52, Rebirth, the unfortunately canceled 5G. The through line of your career seems to be it's very clearly launching new lines, concepts, and an eagerness to experiment. So each one, I've noticed, like the media landscape, the distribution landscape, it's been different each time for each of those major categories. So for you, what's been the personal challenge that makes this different from your past experiences?
There's a lot of my Mainframe experience that's coming back right now, more so than anything else. When you go into DC, you had a machine that was sort of grinding a little bit because it was just running on inertia. And my job was to come in there and kickstart it and get the engines running again. When I was at Mainframe, it was interesting because we were selling computer animation at a time that nobody knew what computer animation was. We were doing computer animated television series, and there was nothing else on the air to compare it to. Nothing. The only thing that people knew for computer animation was the movie Ants and the movie Toy Story. And those were feature films with $1 million budgets, and we were doing television. So we had to go out there and convince people and show people what the value of computer animation was to a bunch of non-believers. And everybody would try to shut us down every chance we can. And we basically had to carve our own path and convince people that we knew what we're talking about, we knew what we're doing, and we had to lead by example. So when I come when we get to Frank Miller Presents, we see a lot of weaknesses in the comic market and a very lethargic market. A lot of people losing interest in comics. A lot of people just buying it for covers or from basically to flip books, believing they might be valuable at another day. And it's a speculative market driving a lot of things again. And you hear about the industry sort of, grinding again. And we don't believe that's the case. We just believe maybe we're just not doing the right product, the right books. Maybe we need to do things that are excited. And Frank and I would sit and talk about what we loved about comics. And it's not old man's things. It's not that thing where you say, when I was a kid, that was the book I loved. No, we're talking craft, about storytelling, construction, what is necessary and expected in a book. Because if you don't have a strong foundation in your storytelling, then you're not going to have a strong story on top of it if you don't have something to build on top of. So we believe that by bringing some of the craft back into the storytelling, that we think we'll be able to create the types of books that people are hungry for, or what they love about comics and what they're looking for in the comics without even knowing what they're missing. And if we could do that, then we could work with others and, again, lead by example. And then also hopefully have other people join us in the types of stories that we're telling, and hopefully start a way to get people excited about market again. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to remind them about the good parts of the wheel that have been forgotten.
I agree with Matt that I think that's what's worked out a lot in comics, at least when I was reading a lot more DC, that's people were talking about Flashpoint. They were talking about Dark Knight's Metal. They were talking about these characters and they were excited. Even if they weren't excited about it, they were still talking about it. They had
Right.
these comics and they were having a discussion over it. In the last couple of years that I managed the shop, it was, as you were saying, I was out there like, okay, maybe I can sell this cover. I was hoping to sell 10 of a variant cover as opposed to the story itself. I couldn't anymore sell the book by, here's the concept, here's what's happening, Barry Allen is going back and the timeline is going to change, and now we've got these new titles. That wasn't the case anymore in the last couple of years that I was there, and it's unfortunate. And I'm glad that that is still the mindset of let's inspire tomorrow's stories. Let's inspire tomorrow's television or movies or whatever, comics, even creators, because that is what's going to keep the industry alive. It's not going to be variants. It's not going to be special coverage. It's not going to be a new appearance of a character, because as you were saying, I saw a lot of flippers. I saw a lot of eBayers, and I was trying to cater to my readers, to my Wednesday Warriors, and I saw that number dip over time, which was unfortunate. But it sounds like we're getting back to basics here with Frank Miller Presents.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it's about. Listen, this is gonna. I don't know how this sounds, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I've got nothing to prove. Frank's got nothing to prove. I'm pretty happy with my career over the years. I'm happy with what I've done to date. I just still love comics and I still love creation. Same thing with Frank. And for Frank, what he really is inspiring him the most is, and it goes back to actually, it goes a little bit back to Neil's passing. We had this up and running beforehand, but when Neil passed, that put a fire under him that wasn't as strong before Neil passed. And he would tell the stories about how Neil Adams was his mentor. He was the one that pushed him away and forced him to be a better artist and taught him what he was doing wrong and helped him get his first job and all these things. And that was so important to Frank about what Neil did. And then he looked in the business and he saw a lot of people being very compartmentalized, working as individuals, working to push their own brands forward rather than the product that they were doing. And we realized something got lost in the process. The community spirit is what keeps this industry alive, and that sense of collaboration and artist and writer working together to elevate the property. You're much stronger because of the strength of the two of you working together than against each other, or somebody just trying to direct a single vision that works to their interests rather than the story's interest or even the interest. And we got to break that a little bit. We got to get back to remembering what we love about the books and making sure that we're doing it right, because that's the only way everyone else is going to start loving what we do, and that's kind of what we're about. And it might work, it might not, but I don't care. I'm having a blast doing it. I'm happy with the end product and I'm enjoying myself. And if I was a fan out there buying a book, I would really pick this up because I this is the type of thing that I'd be looking for. So, I'm hoping that those sensibilities run true for everybody. And it's not just an older sensibility, it's just a quality and story sensibility.
Through a smaller publisher, how involved are the creators now as opposed to where if they would have worked for a bigger company like one of the big two, where they would have to hand their work over to various departments? But with Frank Miller Presents, how's that process much more streamlined, working directly with you and Frank?
There's only two of us working behind the scenes, so everybody's chipping in. That's what I call it. Everybody's involved. Everybody's giving notes. Everybody's helping each other, picking each other up, which is wonderful. And what's great about working on a small line of books is you really get a chance to work with people you really enjoy working with. And I can't speak highly enough of everybody that's involved in the company. Everybody is tried and true, believes in what we're doing, and I think that's so essential to the entire process. Then they're not filling time in between other assignments. This is their assignment. Philip Tan, for the most part, has dedicated 2 years of his life to get this product off the ground. And, and he didn't even blink twice about doing that. He loves working with Frank. And I've known Philip almost since when I first started at DC. He and I worked together on Outsiders and Calypso and so many books together. And I love working with him. But I'll tell you honestly, Frank's taken it to a new level, and that makes me feel good because I've always felt Philip is one of the strongest, most amazing artists in the business. He just hasn't been noticed, and this book will get him noticed.
Perfect. Very exciting. Very excited for these books. We do have a couple of questions from the Brocat Core members out there from your history with DC. This first one comes from Twitter user @Enamo Iadho. who asked, quote, "If you were given an opportunity to write a DC character now, who would you pick?" End quote.
Well, the good part is that I was at DC for 20 years, almost 20 years. And so I got a chance to pick and choose some of the characters that I really loved the most. That's the only reason why I was writing the ones I liked. I always like the odd corners of the DC universe. And when you're in charge of the company, you have to be rather magnanimous and have to say you love them all. Not true. I love the Metaman more than anything else. And I got a chance to write them twice in Wednesday Comics. But doing the 12-part maxi series right before I left and after I left was still very special to me. It really scratched every itch I had at DC for the characters themselves.
And then this next one comes from Twitter user @CubanSlim. He's also a host on the show. He asks, quote, "If you are allowed to discuss, why did you leave DC? And any regrets regarding the 5G plan?"
You know what? I mean, regrets, who has regrets? I mean, what's there to regret? I got a chance to be working in comics with one of the premier companies for 20 years, got a chance to run direction of the characters and stories for an extended period of time. So can't have a single regret on that. But I did have a great story for 5G that I'm disappointed that it wasn't executed the way I had hoped it to be, which is, par for the course. But why I left DC is that, it's all behind the scenes. There's a lot of management changes and a lot of things occur. And the people that brought me in were no longer there. And the directions the company was moving in weren't ones that I truly believed in. So, I think we realized it was best for everybody that it was creating too much tension all around. And that's not what you want to do. So the main goal is to leave with a good feeling and a good sensibility. And, I felt like I accomplished everything. And I think, honestly, I always joke, I said, I think we got to touch every single character that DC had while I was there. We were actually working on Jason's quest for 5 seconds. And I'm like, when you're at Jason's quest, you're pretty much at the bottom of the barrel. So it's no sense repeating yourself and time to move on. And we'll see if anybody even knows what Jason's quest is.
Yeah, let us know on Twitter if you know.
Somebody knows.
Absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, with the timing that ended up changing, and I saw the change as it was going into Discovery, and it was directionless, honestly. And it kind of stayed that way by the time I had finally left the comic shop, and it seems to still be that way. So I don't really know if 5G even could have truly happened in that same way, in the way that I've heard the plan. You've discussed it on Word Balloon and online. And yeah. I don't even know if that would have been possible with the buyout that happened. It's just kind of bizarre that all happened at once. So it almost seemed like almost good, because we're getting Frank Miller Presents out of this. And as you were saying, the same people aren't there anymore. So it's kind of like, all right, well.
Yeah, my running joke on DC was that when I realized editorially we were making Supergirl evil for the 4th time, I knew I was done. So it's like, you start to see repeating of certain gags, and with 5G, there was a 5-year plan there that I really felt strongly about, but it would take a lot of effort and work to get to it. And ultimately, I was driving a lot of that. So it makes sense that it didn't happen once I was gone.
I was very intrigued by the concept of 5G, and it was as DC is close and near and dear to my heart. I was very intrigued by, okay, we're now seeing what the world would be like if these characters had been allowed to age and new successors, and it kind of brought me back to creating my own spins on characters as a kid, and or when Alex Ross was would detail his background, creating the Green Bullet, or those minor variations on DC characters, that you all create, toss around in your own mental sandbox. I was very intrigued by that. I wish we'd been able to see it come to fruition.
The interesting thing is, it goes back to even Frank Miller Presents. I was never going to approach anything custodial, meaning you just go in and making sure it all stays the same and all stays comfortable. And I used to hear that from fans a lot of times. They said, could you just keep my characters safe? Can you keep them safe? And I'm like, don't you realize my job is to make sure they're never safe? That's the only way I have the way to tell story. And but the job, every job is about learning and growing, and if you stop challenging yourself and you stop thinking and growing and pushing, then you've sort of outlived your usefulness in that position. And for me, I've seen the different events we did over the years, and we were learning from them and earning them. And what the 5G was really taking all the thoughts and ideas of what worked and didn't work in the past and trying to build an event. And we realized that the legacy aspect and the generational aspect is really what the fans love the most. When I hear from an angry Nightwing fan or an angry Kid Flash, Wally West fan, they're angry because these are characters they grew up with. They grew up with them. Do you know what I mean? And if you look at this, we used to talk about the two types of storytelling, and we used to use the difference between Bart Simpson and Harry Potter. Okay. And if you look at Bart Simpson, he's never aged or ever changed, right? For 23, 25 years, whatever it is. And Harry Potter aged and grew with every book. So you have two different types of storytelling. So you look at the DC universe, and the problem was that Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were Bart Simpson. The rest of the DC universe was Harry Potter. So when you put the two together, you always had this conflict of these characters aging around characters that don't age and creating the conflicts. And that used to lead into a lot of the reboots. Everything sort of just started crashing into each other until you had to give that reset where everybody starts again. But then the same problems continued. So by doing 5G, we're going to eliminate those problems by extricating our actual timeline from beginning to end so that you could follow all your stories and everything that you cared about is in there that mattered. And you can see all your characters age in the proper manner. So therefore, you can see where they would be at a certain point that's actually reflective of everything. So that all the Robins weren't the same age, which never made any sense. And all these other things that were occurring made a lot more sense going forward. And then there was a bigger story underneath it all that pulled it all together in a way that I think could have been exciting. Anyway, what do I know?
Well, for me, that seemed to be delivering on a promise and idea that was kind of, had been toyed upon in like standalone projects like the Chris Claremont, Dusty Abel, Superman, Wonder Woman series where you got to see characters age.
Yep.
And then I believe the title was Son of Superman. It was the graphic novel with J.H. Williams in the art where we got to see an older Bruce Wayne who was still Batman and a President Jordan. So it was interesting to see like these things touched upon, and I was really excited to see like what would a full line be looking like.
I mean that was one of the reasons why I was never a huge fan of Elseworlds. I mean, there's some brilliant stories told in Elseworlds. Don't get me wrong about that. As a publisher, I wasn't a fan of Elseworlds because it took all the best, most interesting stories and moved it outside of the continuity. So you had all this great stuff happening outside the line, and then the line in the middle sort of languished. And it didn't get all the good stories and the good creators. And my goal was always to put the best creators on the main line to make sure that the main line grew, because that's the way the line is the healthiest, because books feed into each other and you have a much wider sense of success rather than these individual one-offs being successful outside of the main line of continuity. And you don't want to devalue the main line of continuity by making all the external stories better. So that's why I was always trying to force everything back and get rid of all those alternate stories. But the reality is what you just said is that there's some really interesting things that if you make the change, it's exciting. And I always used to say this, I don't want to hear how this story ends. I want to hear what stories it leads into. What stories does it create? Because if you could create an interesting story that breeds 10 more interesting stories, that's the win. If you do something that's encapsulated and has a beginning, middle, and end, that's wonderful. And it's its own thing, but it doesn't give value to the line and to the universe. And when you're in the job, your job is to elevate the universe, not just an individual story or an individual creator.
I've always found like the best, I'm sure you basically touched upon, is that the best storytelling is when you don't know where the story is going to end. You don't know who's going to make it out alive and where it's going to go. You're taking on this journey when you know where someone's story ends. Like you said, with these characters like Batman, Superman, that never age, but the characters around them age.
Yeah,
it does get a little weird. It takes a lot of the discovery out of it.
It does, and ultimately you wind up repeating yourself. That's the real problem, is that you keep on telling the same story over and over again. How many times are we going to find out somebody's identity? How many times are we going to kill them? How many times are we going to do the same thing? One of the major parts is consequences we used to talk about. Again, stories have to have consequences. That's when they matter. When an event happens, they got to have consequences that just don't get you into the next event. They should have consequences that pay out in the line so you can see how it affects the the day-to-day aspects of the actual characters themselves in their individual titles. And when those changes in event change the ongoing title for an extended period of time, it makes the event more valuable and it makes the line more valuable. But if you back an event into an event, all you're doing is change upon top of change upon top of change, and nothing has a chance to set and become the new norm. And you can't, when you don't have a new norm, change doesn't matter. It just becomes just this endless series of different things. And ultimately, people just defer back in their minds to the version that they remember best, and they erase everything else that's happened after.
Perfect.
I think a lot about this.
Before we recap on where readers can find these books and how they can get them, Matt, was there anything else you wanted to comment on or question before we wrap up today?
Didio, Dan touched on everything that I had a question on, and it was just an honor to kind of, talk about, his experience in the industry and where he's come from. And every question I had was answered.
Oh,
perfect.
Well, that's a first. That's a first for me.
Yeah. Honestly, Dan, it's I've talked about this. They've heard this for the last 10 years when I covered a lot of DC books. These have been some of my favorite, not just DC comics, but comics. These are comics that I'm going to keep. These are comics that I'm going to try to pass on to my son and daughter someday. And if they want to keep them, great. If not, it's up to them. But these are books that came out under you and the rest of your creators. So I want to thank you for the years of comics and also for the years of comics that are incoming with Frank Miller Presents. I was really happy to hear the news that you are doing this line of Frank Miller Presents and that we are getting more comics from you and everyone else at Frank Miller Presents. So I just wanted to say thank you for the many years before and also the ones that are coming up here with these great titles.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's listen, we all, like I said, when I was at DC, I used to say this line to everybody: we're just renting the jobs, because ultimately you knew sometime it's going to end. You knew it, because I was careful enough to understand the history of the people who existed before me and all the incredible talented people that more talented than I were that had the job before I was. I was a monstrous fan of Jeanette Collin. I thought she was brilliant. So for me, it was fun to partake and participate. But I just love comics so much, you just can't get rid of me. I just I like being involved. I like having fun. And there's always stories to tell. That's the best part about it. And when you get a chance to a couple of people that share that same enthusiasm, excitement, we're always going to be that 12-year-old kid remembering that first book that we always loved. And ultimately, that's the story we keep telling over and over again, is just those incredible things that we hopefully can recontextualize for a new audience and create things that they'll love as much as we did when we were younger. And that's the goal for all this, is to have some fun and have people pick up books that just, they feel good about after they well, hoping, fingers crossed, man, fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Very well put. Ancient Enemies and Ronin Book 2, once again, available now at your local comic shop. If you do enjoy issue number 1 of these titles, don't forget to add them to your subscription. This is something that I really strongly believed in, and I always reminded my subscribers, don't leave it up to chance that issue 2 or issue 3 are going to be on the shelves just because you got it last time. Add it to your subscription. That lets your comic shop know that you want the rest of the series, and that's also what ensures that you do get the next 5 issues of Ancient Enemies or Ronin. Or if you're interested in upcoming books, make sure to check the previews catalog. You have your own section there for Frank Miller Presents. I've seen the preview pages on there as well. And if you do see it on there, let your comic shop know so that they can order your copy, so that they can make sure that your copy is reserved. If you don't have a subscription, local comic shops will hold even just 1 or 2 titles aside for you. Just let them know, and they will order them for you. So, Dan, thank you so much once again. Please let them know where they can find some preview pages, Frank Miller Presents, and where they can find you if they want to continue the conversation.
Okay, we have our website set up is frankmillerpresents.com. We actually take questions over there. It may take us a little while to get to it just because there's only a couple of us doing it. But I'd love to hear from everybody. We're putting up all our preview pages up there. I'm going to be putting up the pages from the 0 issue, the ash can, up there as well, so you can get a chance to see some of the behind the scenes for Ancient Enemy and for Ronin. So you get a little bit of a setup on each one of those books. You can always see it there. And I'm looking forward to really getting a chance to actually get to some of the stores too. Frank and I have some signings set up over the next few months. We got a store a month that we're trying to hit. We're actually going to be in New York in December. DC in January, and then Orlando in February.
Nice.
So my goal is to start getting around and seeing everybody again. We're going grassroots on this. We want to make sure that we're talking directly to the fans and to the people who really enjoy comics and buying comics. That's why I like going to the stores. That's where our community is, and we're taking it right to them.
Well, my birthday is in February, and I do live in Orlando, so I'll be seeing you then.
Yeah, we'll be there. We'll be there. We'll be there first weekend in February. Don't tell anybody. So I guess we just told them.
We can edit that part out.
Yeah, but we'll be there. Frank and I both be there. We'll have some fun. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Absolutely. Matt and I will be there, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of these titles in person again on paper, ink. It's just really exciting to see that come to fruition. And again, that is the forefront of these titles. That gets me personally very excited as a physical media collector. So thank you so much, Dan, for being on, and Matt as well for helping me host this episode. If you on the other side have enjoyed everything, want to see some preview pages, that page again is frankmillerpresents.com. There will be links in the description of today's show. So if you're driving, come back to the show. Next time you get a chance, swipe on over to the description. You will find all the links right there in the description. So I've been Daniel, joined by Dan and Matt, and Brocat Core. All will be well.